Going to welcome everyone here. Just get a couple more before we started. Good to hear. This is just another kind of a milestone in this whole process of developing the hub. You know, we've had a number of sessions over the years, and that somebody will go over that over the years. Has it been years?
It has been years.
It's been years. You know, this is just another step in the process. But I do want to, first of all, recognize that we're meeting on the territory of the Endicott people here. We have the architects, Mike and Natalie from O4 Architecture here this evening to present to us the schematic design of the hub building. Lisa is she's here on screen, not in person, but she is recording. It's not being live streamed, but it's being recorded. And then the presentation is going to be going up on our website at a later date. I don't know how long it takes to do that. We have a microphone here. I'm going to move it over a little bit, but it's really important, I think, if we try to keep side conversations as quiet as we can for the recording. And if you do have questions after that you speak fairly loud, it's a pretty good mic, but we just want to make sure all voices are heard. So I think that's it. And I'm just going to turn it over to Diane.
Thanks, Denise. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. And we're going to start this afternoon just by reviewing the results of the community engagement activities that we did. Sort of this work was all done up front, and then the results of it all accumulated and provided to Mike and Natalie and their team. And this is the information that they then kind of incorporated when they started working on the schematic design and came up with what we're going to look at today. So we'll talk a little bit about the project, what we heard through the engagement, and then we'll see the presentation for the schematic design. So, you know, as we all know, this is the project that is located at 320, 400, and 420 Fraser Street, commonly referred to as the Community Hub. It was envisioned as an accessible and inclusive space for both residents of the Village of Lytton and all of the surrounding areas. The funding for the project comes from the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program under what was Infrastructure Canada is now Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. $25.9 million was approved just over a year ago for this project. I'm going to actually skip to the next slide, Lisa, please. So this is a list of the community engagement activities that have kind of brought us to this point. And so, you know, it really started in the fall of 2023 when we had a session here at the community hall or the parish hall where we talked about just all the various priorities that the village, you know, could consider underneath that broad $64 million funding that was provided by Infrastructure Canada. And at that time, we collected information from people and things like the fire hall and the village office and the pool, and those types of things were all identified as important priorities for the rebuilding. We also did a survey at that time to try to capture people that weren't able to come in person to the event and asking similar questions. And that information was all kind of put together and provided to council at that time. And then we started working on the application to Infrastructure Canada for the Community Hub project. And at that time, it was intended to include the museum, the library, community gathering space, the pool, some outdoor gathering space to hold events and other things, and then just some sort of green space as well. In January 2025, we had an open house here at the parish hall where we were talking about what types of things people wanted to see included in the hub and what types of things were maybe missing from some of the initial plans that had been looked at. So we gathered all of that information, and again, we followed it up with a survey. Some of the people that were here to fill out the survey, but then we also followed up with some folks that weren't here to get their input in it as well. That's what sort of ended up with the agreement and the final contract with Infrastructure Canada. So in August of 2025, we then had some engagement activities at Riverfest. And you may remember we had Mike and Natalie and the team were down at the new Public Works building. They had some boards and some creative ways of asking questions to try to get some information on, again, what kinds of things were important to people and what they wanted to see. And a lot of that engagement focused on things like how they people felt about the hub, how they could see themselves being involved in it, what types of activities they use it for. And then that again was followed up with a survey to try to capture some of the folks that maybe didn't attend to the booth that day. And then following that, in October of 2025, our community engagement manager held open houses in each one of the surrounding communities, where she met with residents, met with community members, and talked again about kind of the vision for the facility and how they could see themselves involved, and what types of things they could imagine doing in the facility. And then again, followed up with a survey to try to capture more input from people that weren't able to attend. So just in terms of the types of things that we heard in those various engagement sessions, sort of the stuff that was kind of prior to 2025, the initial engagements. We talked a lot about kind of what the rebuilding priorities were overall, but including the community hub. We were trying to see if there was support for the community hub project. Looking at what were the priorities community needs and kind of shared uses that could be incorporated into a facility like the community hub. And then we talked a little bit about the specific requirements that may be there for the Lytton Museum and Archives, the library, the farmers market, cultural spaces, and the pool. So those specific conversations were held at that time as well. Next slide. So in January of 2025, when we had the community engagement opportunities here at the parish hall, we were asking people for information. We also asked specifically, did people support the project or not? We were trying to, get a read on that. And so 73% of the respondents that were in attendance at those sessions did support the proceeding with the project once the federal funding requirements had all been met and that type of stuff. And then in addition to that, we heard some other comments about how this space could help to replace some of the lost community spaces and provide a place for community gathering and recreation and youth activities. There was a lot of comments about improving recreational opportunities for health and well-being, and how those types of the pool and then other fitness and recreational programs could be held at this facility. And then use it to encourage economic growth and attract residents and visitors alike. Next one, please. So what we heard at that time was, some of the gaps that were noted in the concept plan that was used to apply for the funding. People noted that there was no fitness or recreation center in the facility. A mention of parking and electric vehicle charging stations. We talked about electrical hookups for markets and events. The need for some quiet space just to read or to relax. And then the inclusion of the museum and the library. So some of the important considerations that came out of that as well were discussion around the financial viability, the operations and the maintenance of the facility, partnerships with local communities to make sure we avoid redundancies. We're not all building the same types of spaces for the same purposes. And then to expediting the project and try to provide additional opportunities for input along the way. In kind of the Riverfest engagement opportunities, we heard some common themes came out of the various questions that were asked at that, and they were, around the need for healing and connection and belonging, culture, the library, the museum, and some heritage aspects, the recreation, fitness, and pool, food and kitchen and shared meals. There was comments around the comfort and the quality of the space, the well-being, health, resilience, those types of things coming up again, and youth spaces and youth programs. So, and then from that, we kind of listed out the priorities that came out, which were really a space to gather as a whole. And that was, of course, looking at the opportunity to create a large space, which isn't necessarily easy to do if you don't have a large building. Looking at fitness and recreation, specifically connected to aquatics and the pool, space for youth and kids and their programs, celebrating and preserving culture and stories, and then again, quiet space for learning and reflection. And then in terms of the engagement sessions that were held at Siska, Scuppa, Nikamin, Kanakabar, and Lytton First Nation, they had an exercise where they kind of looked at a visioning board to try to create a vision for the facility, and it's up there. And I won't read the whole thing, but it's looking at serving as a center for connection, growth, and well-being. A place that brings people together. We can have learning opportunities and cultural experiences, recreation, and shared events, and just an environment that strengthens community life and supports a vibrant future. So those were the comments that had kind of come out of those sessions. Some of the values that they talked about, and again, we're kind of hearing a lot of the same things were coming up in the engagement sessions, but talking about health and wellness and learning, healing and reconciliation, for it to be inclusive and welcoming, for it to have cultural identity and language, and sustainability and connection to nature. So, the goals being around support well-being across generations, foster belonging and reconnection, and honor the culture and strengthen the Latin identity. And then the final things that we heard through that was for the inclusive aquatic area, the flexible gathering area, a reflection space, flexible multi-use rooms, and this was in relation to running a bunch of different programs where you might have 10 participants or 20 participants, an outdoor shaded gathering space, and for the project to be climate resilient. So that's the kind of the snapshot of the engagement that's been held to date and the results of what we heard. Some of the future engagement opportunities will focus more on the details now, looking at the look and feel of spaces and how they're, a little bit more discussion about how they're going to be used and how they need to be outfitted and designed more specifically. Get into kind of the discussions around the specific uses like the museum, the pool, or the library, and really kind of delving into it in more detail. But this is a summary of the engagement. There's, of course, if you look at all of the details, there is more. Throughout this whole process, we've been working with the project advisory committee that was struck back. I think it was in late 2024. The project advisory committee has representatives from all of the various communities around us, including the TNRD and the Village of Lytton. And we've been working through, they meet really on an as-needed basis, but work through a number of different questions around the types of things that should be included in the hub, and have always been providing advice to council on what kind of activities and uses we should be considering for the project. So that's another important component that has fed into the engagement results that Mike, Natalie, and team have considered in coming up with this. So with that, as just kind of the precursor of what we heard, I'll turn it over to you guys, and you can kind of explain how you made that happen in the form of a building.
Thanks, Dan. I know that's speaking up because it's easier. Thanks, Dan, and thank you for everybody for joining us this afternoon. Going back, we were engaged in mid-2025, December 2025, and this is when we first came up. We've been up here a few times since, and we're looking forward to coming back. I think right now what we're happy to share is just where we're at today. And I think, as Diane pointed out, we have a lot more things to discuss and a lot more things to talk about. Again, this is the first step in a series of steps as we go through the design of this building, and we're sharing the ideas that we've developed with council and their input, and going forward with a plan and with some spaces that we think are really going to resonate. And we talked about flexibility, we've talked about energy efficiency, we talked about fire resilience, and a lot of those things now he's going to go into some more detail about. We are obviously happy to have questions. It's probably best for me to keep it to the end and we can deal with it on a more intentional basis and answer everybody as concisely and clearly as we can. But we're going to do this in a two-pronged way. Natalie's going to run through an electronic presentation online for everybody to follow along so they can clearly see. And I'll hold up the boards for everybody here. So and we can walk through that as we start right now. So
for anybody on this side of the room, if you do want to move over, you'll see better, but we'll also have it up on the screen. I've seen that. Thank you.
Share my screen.
We've got an opportunity to come up and look at these. We're gonna keep these here. These are gonna stay at the community hall.
Yeah, that's correct.
Leave them with you guys, so
Yeah.
I'll be here for time, for a longer period of time.
Okay, fantastic. I'm gonna talk you through it and Mike is gonna point and follow along there as I'm doing so. Please have on here. Hello, welcome. Any more chairs on that side? Okay. Great. So to start us off on this first board, it seemed appropriate to start off with a couple of goals for the project. So our first goal, as we were thinking about the design, and a lot of this was derived obviously from the community engagement, was the project being sort of the location for the location, which we'll talk a little bit about some of the site studies that we did. So make sure that the building is contextually appropriate for the geographic region and reflective of the area. Obviously, the project needs to be by the community for the community. So as Diane mentioned, there's quite a bit of engagement that was done to make sure we're hearing from people directly what their needs are. The idea of the third goal, protecting for today and ready for tomorrow. So we understand that obviously protection from the environment and the climate in the region is especially important in this region, and then also anticipating how the environment may change in the future. So making sure it's ready for that both environmentally and then also in terms of the flexibility of the programs that may be needed in the future. And then goal 4 here is a hub that the community can look after. We understand that this is a building that needs to be able to be maintained in the long run, and that is something that we're factoring in the design choices as we've developed this schematic design. So supporting goal 1, just on the sort of left side of the board here, we did a couple of site studies and context mapping. I won't go into these in too much detail. People can look at them more themselves, but just to give you an idea of some of the things we looked at, the first one on the top is looking at the climate in the region. So hear kind of stories from people about the wind and the sun, and obviously we've experienced that a little bit being in Lytton ourselves. However, we wanted some data to support that. So you'll see kind of mapping of the solar rows and the wind rows on our exact site, looking at the sort of plants and native flora and fauna in the region. The next one looks at kind of the village and what it was before. Obviously, it's a unique context as an architect to come into a space, and right now there isn't a lot of urban context around us to pull from. And so we wanted to look at historic photos of the village and images of how it was laid out and understand the main streets and where the activity was in the village previously, and how our site relates to the rest of the village and how it will in the future once there's more in the village. So we highlighted sort of with some of the dash circles, areas of major noise, the train tracks running adjacent to the site, as well as the squiggly lines through the middle, indicating sort of major pedestrian areas through the village. And then we see some photos of local objects along the side that are actually remaining after the fire, as well as on the right side, some images of the village prior to the fire. And then this third map below shows we were interested, and Diane hinted at this, but wanting to understand what the other amenities are in the surrounding region. So after talking to some folks with the village, we got some of that information to make sure we could see, what other hospitality programs and facilities are available, as well as outdoor recreation, other spaces for gathering, and sort of knowledge programs and functions, and as well, just to see where the hub would fit into all of that. We also studied a little bit in the middle here. You see a material palette. So materials are an important part of the project for kind of the durability and longevity of this building. And we did want it to also feel like something that fits into the landscape. So we studied the materials around the site and in the region generally to kind of pull, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the design, but that was inspired by some of the things we saw when we were here visiting the site. And then moving into the actual design itself, sort of you can see the site plan on the right side of the board. And just below that, these kind of diagrams indicating the design rationale. And so those speak to each other, and essentially the diagrams are explaining why the building is located where it is, and how that relates to the geography of the site. So the first one there talks about the hub building being oriented north-south along the west bank of the river and set back towards the west side. This allows space for a large plaza to be provided between Fraser Street and the hub. The building itself has a sort of simple rectangular footprint, and then is organized around, which we see in the third diagram on the top right there, a central gathering space, which we're calling the community living room. And that central gathering space organizes the functions of the building and then also leads directly through to the west side, affording views onto the river. The plaza is fully covered in order to provide shelter from the sun and the elements for the market wheel as an important function to be supporting the plaza, as well as other events that may take place there. And those are located right on Fraser Street, so there's clear visibility for passersby of the activities taking place there. And then the last thing we factored in as a major sort of driver for the design organization is the need to protect the south side and the west side of the building and the plaza in particular from the wind, which we know comes primarily from the south, as well as from the sun, which you're getting the most direct sun exposure on the south side of the building and on the west side as well, around sunset. And then the last thing to note here when you're looking at that site plan in the middle is that the pool and the pool building are sort of oriented the same way as the hub along Fraser Street. So that way it's the pool and the plaza are directly on the street with the building set back to the west. And then the canopies that we've shown, which we'll talk about a little bit more, the covered plaza, and then these additional canopies that have a similar design language are used to link the hub building and the pool building across the site. So they're kind of an architectural way of unifying those buildings form and materially. We have hatched in there, but the pool building is not in the hub project scope specifically. So while we are in dialogue with that building and considering it in our design, that's not something that's detailed in the boards that you'll see here today. Okay, and the next one here, you can switch over. So we'll take you through the level 1 floor plan.
Come on, you turn.
Here, right in the middle of the plan, right between the plaza and hub, you can see the main entry. There's a little teal rectangle pointing you right into the front doors there. So we have a double entry vestibule to help with blocking wind as you're entering the building. And that takes you into the community living room, which for those who can see, like Jill pointed out, but we have sort of a cross dashed line indicating that the front portion of that community living room is a double height ceiling space. So it's taller than the other portions of the building. So it have a vault ceiling, and you imagine that an exposed wooden structure to make that space feel a little more grand and special as you're entering right into the building. We've shown some integrated seating in that community living room, as well as this is the area where you can access all of the other functions within the hub. And at the end of the community living room, you have views out to the river on the west side, as we mentioned. So the first space that you might enter would be the museum on the left side. And the museum is adjacent to the plaza, so that you have some sort of signage and frontage close to Fraser Street that will be easily visible to folks wanting to visit. It has additional archival storage provided. And it's also adjacent to the cultural space, which we wanted to be sure that there's a dialogue between the museum and the cultural room, which we imagine as being more representative of the First Nations.
If you see a need to zoom in on that, I think Lisa maybe can do that.
Okay.
Are you running it from your machine?
I do have-
I apologize.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay. Let's
Yeah,
see.
it'd be good to have.
Okay, I actually can.
Oh, good.
I wasn't sure.
Okay.
Here we go. That'll be a little easier.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Denise.
Yeah, good.
So the cultural room, the other thing to note, this does have storage support to support any different uses for that space, which we imagine being quite flexible. We've also indicated a dashed line here, just as a circle, because we anticipate having some sort of special feature in this room that's circular to encourage circular gathering, reflecting the kind of traditional gathering that would happen we heard from our interclimate engagement. Across from the cultural room here, we have actually just as you exit here, then you can see there's a covered patio that you would access from the community living room. This is something that is covered by the second story of the building, extends out on the west side so that there's some, so that there's some shade at the top of the, since that is on the west side. So it's a covered patio with views up to the river all the way along. We come back into the building. The next room that we would enter would be the library. The library is about 500 square feet that we provided, and we understand this is sort of a tenant fit out space, or we've just provided a space available, and this will be designed in more detail. So the library is to use that space. And then the library as well is located towards the west side, which is a little bit, we imagine, a quieter side of the building, and it has those views out to the river. It's a little bit more of a quiet, contemplative space. There is support storage for the library as well. Quickly note the washrooms here, which are right in the center of these different use spaces. Only things to note about the washrooms, we have 10 washrooms in the main core here. There's 2 additional washrooms off the museum just for that space for staff needs. And then also the washrooms are non-gendered, and they are instead of stalls, these are individual toilet rooms. Walls.
I should say that the amount of quantity of washrooms, it looks quite a bit. The amount of washrooms is driven by a building code requirements, the size of space of your building. So we're trying to find that balance between space and services around. So
yeah. And then moving down to the multi-purpose rooms, which are an important one because a lot of the feedback we heard during the engagement was for a lot of different interesting and exciting types of uses, which just require a room that can do a lot of different things. So the smaller multi-purpose rooms are part of supporting that flexibility. So what we've shown here in the design, I don't know how well you can see on the boards, but there's a divider in the middle of these multi-purpose rooms. And so what we anticipate here is that this is one larger room, which could accommodate about 40 people, or you could extend this movable partition and divide it up into 2 smaller rooms to support about 20 people each. And then each of those would have its own dedicated storage, some kind of cubbies or lockable storage for different programs to come in and keep materials on site. And the multi-purpose rooms here spill out onto this glazed corridor, which we provided. We anticipate this provides some connection directly to the plaza. So if any of the functions happening in those rooms want access to the plaza, these glazed wall, we're imagining kind of sliding doors there so that you can easily open a door and have access directly to the outdoors from those multi-purpose rooms. It's also adjacent to the kitchen in case any of these programs in there may need support from the kitchen or sinks or things like that. And then moving through, we go to one of the more important functions in the building, which is the community gathering space. This is the largest space in the building, so it's sized for up to 250 people, and it is adjacent to the plaza, so that there can be that connection between events happening perhaps in the plaza and community gathering space. And we've shown here these dash lines that you're seeing close to the front wall. That's indicating fold-up doors, so some very large garage-style doors that could be folded up, so that you could essentially that wall on the plaza becomes totally open and visible, and you would have seamless passage between the multi-purpose space and the plaza, so that events could that becomes one large event space between the indoor and the outdoor. We've also shown here, similar to the community living room, this X in the room here on the lower portion of the plan, which indicates that is open to above or a double height space. So that's to give that room sort of a more grand feel, and similarly we have an exposed wood ceiling in there to give that space some significance given the kinds of special activities that would take place there. And I think just more practically, there's a large storage room there to provide support for any events taking place there, any furniture that needs to be kept on site, as well as a secondary access to the washrooms, so that during a large event, people can access the washrooms directly rather than having to go through the rest of the building. And of course, an adjacency to the kitchen, so that if there's food being served in an event, that's something that can happen directly off that room. Another relationship with the kitchen that I hadn't mentioned was the opportunity, as I said, with this sliding doors just outside of the kitchen in this glazed hallway would be an opportunity to have the kitchen act as concession for any events taking place in the plaza. So there's a large window in the front of the kitchen, and people potentially attending an event out in the covered plaza could walk right through that open wall up to the concession. Be served food or beverages. The kitchen itself is focused more on serving food, but we do anticipate providing cooking equipment, which was something that was requested. And then moving out into the plaza itself here, you'll see it is quite a large space, and the extents of the plaza, you can actually see there's sort of a paved patch that we've shown here, just to help clarify where the plaza extends to, as well as there's a dashed line around there indicating the extents of the roof line that are covering that. So the plaza is entirely covered. The brown squares that you're seeing are the support structure for the plaza. We've tried to space those as far apart as possible to keep the plaza very flexible and a large open space in the middle for all kinds of activities, suitable structures, and blocking any of the function. We've also shown at the south side potential to have a stage that could be built in there. The sort of shape and size of this is still under consideration, but that could be a built-in feature that could be used by the community flexibly at different times. And then in addition, on the far south side, going back to the wind, which we're all hearing right now, we have indicated a wind barrier of some kind. This is something we're still looking into, but that there would need to be a solid wind break at the south side to prevent wind from rushing through the plaza during events. So that pretty much covers the ground level. You will also see on the top right-hand side, the plaza structure continuing over towards where the pool building is. As we mentioned before, we wanted to provide a covered walkway to the other side of the site. So then taking us up to the second level, on the south side here, you'll see we provided a drivable path up to what is the dwelling entry, and that is what is primarily on the second floor. So just past what we have here, some plaza storage, is the dwelling entry on the south side, which is adjacent to the residential lot next to the hub. There's a vestibule at the entrance, as well as a small foyer, and the elevator to take you up to that second floor. Towards the west side, there's more practically a fire stair that goes as well as up to the dwellings, down to storage for the residential suites, as well as mechanical and service space, which would be on a below grade level, which we haven't shown here, but that's just for some practical additional space. Okay, and then our next board here, once we go upstairs, we will come out on the south side here from the elevator. And then that takes us out into what we have here, a layout for the suites on the second floor. It's a long corridor from one end of the building to the other with units on either side. What we're showing here are 11 units that are provided. This is sort of a sample configuration. We've noted here at the top, the dwelling layouts are for illustrative purposes only, so actual layouts are to be confirmed. But we've shown a range of different possibilities from studios, quite a few one bedrooms, and then I think we have 3 2-bedroom units as well, just to make sure that those configurations actually work and that there's enough space for those options. That's something that will be confirmed at a later time. The other thing to note on the second floor here is these areas with the X's. You'll see those are what we were referring to earlier, where the community living room on the ground floor and the community gathering space both have those double height ceilings. And so that's actually coming all the way up through the second floor. So that's looking down to the spaces below. And then there's opportunities for windows on the second level to bring more light in above the canopy roof into those spaces. The other thing to note here is that the residences all have covered balconies. So that's on the west side looking towards the river, as well as the east side looking over the plaza canopy. And we've shown here some screening elements, which you'll see in some of the other views, just to help block sun and then also for fire protection. I think that's it through. Okay. And then of course at the north side, we need a second exit stair, so that's just required for code. And that takes us to the elevations, which are, oops, sorry.
You want to go through the.
Yeah, I'll start here on the right, actually. So this one, just so everyone can see, this is a view looking at the north wall of the hub. There we go. So you're up on the north, looking at that north wall. And just to highlight here that the primary form of the building is a sloped gable roof. This is quite a simple form and is easy to maintain. So this is a single roof line running across the whole building. You can see the overhang that we mentioned, where the upper story actually overhangs that covered patio on the ground floor, and that's to help provide some shade on the west side where you're getting a lot of direct sun. The canopy roof on the east side connects directly to the hub building, and that is to provide continuous protection from the elements as we walk all along that east face of the hub. So there would be full coverage there. And then if we move over to the other elevation here, which is just sort of a straight on view of the hub from Fraser Street. Sorry. Okay, we're not going to zoom in anymore. That's this one at the bottom of the page here, which you can see at the bottom of the board. The canopy roof profile, which you can see is sort of a waving line here with these V shapes, provides kind of it's an inverted gable form, creating a bit of a rhythm across the site. You can see we've continued it in the canopy that connects the buildings. And we chose that gable form as kind of a recognizable and familiar shape representative of home and shelter for a lot of community members. So I hope this would be a comforting form. This is also one that provides something a little more dynamic on the Fraser Street side, since the roof line is straight on that side. And then we've pulled up the canopy right at the main entry to the building, you can see there, just to kind of highlight where the entrance actually is, since it is a very large canopy space. The canopy height is set below the second story windows to allow natural light into the dwellings, which is important since those are directly above. And then, as I mentioned before, the canopy is based on this replicable module that carries across the whole site to give kind of continuity across the buildings.
I think another part of the canopy that we've been working on and we're going to continue to work on is creating a nice space. I mean, it's we want to make sure that we can get some light under there. We want to make sure that the air can move under there and it doesn't become just a simple covered space. It should be visually interesting and it should be a place where people do want to gather at the same time. So we're still playing with that a little bit. We've got some work to do on some of those details, but the simplicity here is really important because I think it's something that we can kind of repeat and can be sort of done in a way that is prefabricated in a shop and brought to site and erected pretty quickly. I think that helps construction and that helps everything around that. So we're working on that and we have some ideas that we'll continue to share as we go forward.
Other graphics that we've provided, I'll talk a little bit about the materials for the building, which is kind of the last point here. So what you see here is a view of the building from Fraser Street. So similar to what we were just looking at, but this is a perspective. So it has a lot more depth to it. And here, generally the materials for the building, the focus was on fire resiliency when we were selecting these. So making sure that they're non-combustible and that they're materials that are long lasting and durable and will hold up to the climate here. So we're showing terracotta wall panels at this point. This is the exact style and size and pattern of these is something to be confirmed and developed further. But the reasoning behind this material choice was that it's a clay-based material, so it's something that has a low carbon impact, which is important for the sustainability of the project. It's also non-combustible. And it's quite durable, being kind of a masonry product with the ability to replace, when it's panelized, individual panels if some are damaged, rather than having to replace a larger system. It also has a color range that's reflective of the surrounding landscape. We've shown quite one that's fairly sort of red and warm, but this terracotta comes in a lot of different colors. So there's a range of more sandy and earthy tones, different shades of browns and pinks and reds that are available. And that's something we'll develop more as the project continues to develop. It also provides a wide variety of patterns and textures and formats that you can light up on the building. So there's an opportunity to create some visual interest and even textural interest as people are walking past the walls, something that isn't so flat. The roofs, we've shown a metal roof here. Metal roofing is sort of easy to install and readily available, and it's non-combustible. It's also very durable with a long life and minimum maintenance requirement. And then the canopy supports, which you're looking at the canopy on the front there. So we've shown for the base support that you can see, this kind of rectangular block, a masonry base, like probably a concrete with a terracotta cladding to match the building. That also gives us something non-combustible at the ground level. And then higher up steel supports, which are lightweight, sort of a strong frame that allows us to have that wide span that we need to allow maximum flexibility in the plaza. And then we imagine the steel frame also being on the roof structure of the canopy, but having so that it is an all metal sort of mass timber panels that are laid into that frame. And that means that when you're under the canopy, you're looking up at a wood ceiling above you, which provides sort of some more visual interest. It can still be fire resistant if you're using a thick wood panel. So this wouldn't be thin members, but something that's thick and sort of is treated properly to make sure that it does have that resilience. And then, of course, the wood underside does provide some additional warmth sort of for that more celebratory gathering space in the plaza. And then in our last image here, just wanted to highlight that obviously the materials and the form of the building includes intentionally simple with relatively few alcoves and soffits. We've tried to avoid that where we can to reduce the risk of embers catching within these spaces. And then where we do have the alcoves of, say, the balconies, we've shown a screening element, which is something we're looking into to have the opportunity to screen that off if there is a fire risk, to make sure that there wouldn't be things getting into.
Checking from the sun as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keeping things a little cooler.
Yeah, practical for both reasons. So that's something we're looking at. You'll see up on that second level. And then just generally, as Mike had sort of mentioned, the images that we provided are early stage visualizations for the building exterior, which are intended to convey the general feel. During the next stage of design, we'll have the opportunity to develop the materials and the exact detailing, how to apply to the building for detail, and then we'll be able to show sort of some visualizations that are more reflective of the actual final product. But this is everything that we have for you today. So thanks everyone for.
I'll add to that. I mean, I think, the idea, once we do settle on materials and once we do settle on some actual finish, this is something we're going to bring up. We're going to hopefully have some touchy-feely presentation that we look at it and see what we're talking about. Rendered images tend to always look flat. Up on the computer screen always looks flat, and we like to do it to show things actually show exactly what you're getting at. So yeah, it is early, and again, there's going to be opportunities for more input and opportunities for more discussion on this. So by all means, don't think that this is the end all be all, and we'll be back multiple times over the course of the next number of months as we get moving forward. And ultimately, the next steps are developing the design further, applying for building permits, getting things arranged, getting contractors on board, and then ultimately starting construction. And things tend to move quickly going forward, and we hope things just keep we keep the momentum moving forward and get things ready to go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie.
You can
Yeah.
come up and have a look, or have a little closer look at it if you need to.
Yeah. Well,
I'd
like to thank Natalie, and I'd like to thank Vanna. I mean, I just had.
He was doing the external.
Yeah, I just wonder how we want to do this, if we want to just have a couple of questions now, if anybody has, or comments, or do we want to do that separately? Thoughts? Lorna, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm here, I guess, representing. It's a beautiful building. have to say that we were disappointed in the small square footage that we're actually ending up with. It's the same square footage as we had in the old museum. But the old museum was kind of overcrowded, plus we had an outdoor space where we have display things, whole backyard at the museum, so we're disappointed with that. I don't know that that can be changed, but I was hoping that we can at least start the group have a discussion with you about what we would like in our space, and that's all the space we're getting. For example, we don't need 2 washrooms. We'd like to have the office so that we can actually be in the office to see what's going on, discuss work. And the other thing, that's more detailed page, but there's a lot of doorways coming into our building now, which means we have reduced space for displays. So if we could have the opportunity to meet Mr. Lytton, because so far we've had no input into this system.
I'll say yes, as a rule, and yeah, I mean, I think we've been kind of working, trying to get the building right sized and make sure that we accounted for the number of different uses that were in the building, but I think this was the perfect time. There's still flexibility in where these walls can go, and I agree with you, the washrooms are kind of an odd thing, and that, you know, allows the museum to operate kind of individually, separate from the rest of the building. But absolutely, I think, you know, ensuring, you know, we're providing proper space for displays and artifacts and anything else that you want to have in there is important. And we certainly enjoy that discussion with the team and getting into more details. And I think that's exactly what we want. We're hesitant to provide just empty spaces. We like to make sure that people can walk through these spaces and understand why and how, and there's a logic to it when we do it. So I'd say that that's absolutely in order, and we'd be happy to meet and sit down and discuss this further.
Yeah, this is one step in the
Yeah.
process. And I look at for example, the kitchen, you know, the counters are being drawn in there. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where the counters are going to go, right? So there's still lots of.
Well, lots of time, and again, those are discussions that we're gonna start to note down, and we'll schedule that with everybody. And there's gonna be, I mean, this is not just the museum space. I think a lot of the spaces we'll have to kind of dive a little bit deeper on and get into a lot more detail on as we go forward.
Good, Tricia.
I'm curious about, you said with the maintenance and your design choices. So do you have any idea what the operation and maintenance costs are going to be? So just looking at it quickly, I'm guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of 17,000 square feet, not including the pool and all of that. From a 200 people in the UI, it costs about $10 a square foot for operation. That's not even talking maintenance. So you'd be looking at about $107,000 a year without factoring in maintenance, without factoring in the pool. So I'm curious, with such a tiny community, what kind of operation costs are you looking at? What's going to happen to the taxpayers here?
It's a very good question, and it's something that I know we've talked to council about and talked to Diane about, and I think that's something that is going to be an ongoing sort of discussion. And when we talk about ease of maintenance, we talk about using durable materials. We talk about materials that wash easily, that don't require special conditions or special circumstances. We talked about some of the equipment that we're going to be specifying, stuff that can be easily serviced, nothing exotic, nothing too technically complex. I mean, I think that's the stage right now, but in terms of an operational cost, our goals right now are about making sure that it is energy conscious and your energy operating costs are as low. And stepping forward a little bit, you know, there's an opportunity to introduce photovoltaics in this building and actually reduce the energy use to almost zero as part of the building. Operationally, that's always an issue, and I don't want to sort of avoid your question. We haven't looked at that sort of yearly operational and maintenance cost in too much detail with council yet.
Totally.
At this point, I think we have talked about certain things, but we haven't finalized those numbers yet. And I'd be remiss if I sort of started talking about, yeah, it's going to be easy or cheap or anything like that. It's going to cost something to maintain, obviously.
Yeah, and I think we explained, I think last night at council, you know, there are still some unknowns yet, like what is the heating system? What is you know, there's things that haven't been decided 100% yet. And so we can't really have provide an exact how much a year it's going to cost to operate until we know a lot more information.
And it's it's not something that we're ignoring. I think it's something that we do talk about, and I think that's part of our generally frequent discussions when we do have is that, hey, we gotta be respectful of this, and let's make sure that we're paying attention to it as we go
Yeah,
forward.
respect, I don't think that they're all in and.
Any other questions? Judith, yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have missed the comment that you made last night about the heating system, because I look at the roof and I don't see any heating, ventilation and cooling units on the roof. So what is the energy system, or did
can I
you
just-
design that or no?
Yeah, so this is just schematic design, right? This is just floor layout. We haven't got to that part yet.
But do you design it?
We'll have our mechanical engineer be looking at it. We've been talking with them about different options and different types of systems, and I think as it relates to some of the funding that we have green building funding coming in, and our systems have to sort of tie into
Or
that
it'll be electric?
funding. Yeah, most likely in terms of yes, it will be all electric based on the green building funding.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, yeah, it will be likely a fully electric building. Now, whether we use heat pumps, small individual heat pumps or larger centralized systems, I think those are things that we can debate, and we can offer actually an operational sort of analysis against each of those different types of systems, which we haven't done yet.
Thank you.
Thanks. Patsy.
I have a question about the net zero aspect of it, like, I mean, obviously, in the building materials, you're gonna have to wanna add various net zero protocols to make sure that it's energy efficient. And so is that something that's ongoing now, or are you?
I think it is, and in the background, while we're preparing these, we're kind of looking at our walls. What are our walls made of, and how much insulation values do we need? And again, it's about picking the right size. I mean, there's a law of diminishing returns. You can't build walls super thick and expect them. Most of the insulation value happens in the first 6 or 8 inches. So we're trying to find a right balance between that. Same thing with the roof, and there's a lot of those things that still haven't been discussed, but all of that is absolutely part of the next technical step as we get forward.
I think maybe something to add to that is that we do have a consultant that's doing energy modeling for the project. So there is someone who's actually taking the mechanical options and the different systems and materials. And they're looking at kind of embodied carbon and operational carbon and long-term outputs and energy.
Can I just add to that?
Yes.
And all of that modeling is required reporting under the GICB agreement that we have. So a lot of the decisions around that will be, tied back into what we're actually obligated to build underneath the agreement.
And not just up to us, I think evaluated by a second set of eyes and saying, hey, have you looked at this or have you tested that? And I think the idea is here is to make sure that we're arriving at the right solution, not necessarily the one we want, but the solution that's going to give you the village the best value.
You spoke about a wall.
That's pretty sweet. Because no one can hear.
Tricia, sorry, can you speak up because the
No one can
microphone?
hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
So that.
A little louder.
You spoke about a wall on the far side of the building
Yes.
for Lincoln's. In the schematics, I don't really see, I mean, how far do you see this wall being?
Well, this
Be
being
able to
the
protect?
south facing wall, we reduced the amount of entrances. Yes, the south facing wall that way, and we reduced the amount of perforations in there. I think the other part of it is, and that we've seen in various houses that are being built right there, is we do want to protect the plaza as well from some of the high winds that pick up in the afternoon. And we talk about the wall being built along here. Do we want to build a solid wall and have nothing? Yeah, something that's high enough and something that allows people to sort of just enter and exit the building, or if you live here, you could walk way up to the residences here, would be right there. So I think again, it's a balance that we're trying to find here. Again, you limit the amount of openings you have on the south side because that's primarily where all the sun comes in too. So trying to keep that to a minimum at the same time as offering a still sort of a welcoming sort of elevation.
Right. So there's a field wall there, if you don't know how high.
I'm sorry, this wall here?
Yeah.
Oh, I would imagine it's 6 to 8 feet high in some cases. Whether it'll be a solid wall altogether, whether we'll step it, I mean, those are a lot of the details that we haven't kind of figured out.
Are there any other comments or Jason?
Yeah, just a quite hear in the presentation, but the larger gathering space that holds up to 200 or so.
250.
Maximum 250, yeah. Great.
The other thing, it's awesome you thought about the wind, the predominant, wind from the south.
It doesn't, you can't ignore it.
Yeah, that's ran around the north wind too, because through the winter months or what have you, a lot of times the north wind comes in stronger
Interesting.
than the south wind for a short span of time. They tend to reap a lot of havoc, so take that into consideration.
Absolutely, no, it's a good point, yeah. I mean, we plan for the worst case scenario, but sometimes it just reverses on you and comes out from a different one. So good to know.
I had a huge covered canopy, and I was standing right there, my mushroom growing operation, and just that north wind come up like that and ripped the whole tarp off in like 2 seconds. And I'd been up for months and months and months against the south wind and whatnot. That north wind just came in.
Welcome to Lytton, right? Jesua has a question or a comment.
I just have a comment because I was thinking about this the other night, and I was thinking, where's the janitor's room on the floor? Because obviously we're going to have that function.
It is there. It is there. Right there in the washroom.
Oh, right, connected to the washroom, good.
Since we close the washroom, because it's a little bit easier, so you have the washroom, but the idea being that you have a mop bucket and on wheels and you can kind of move around. And again, that's not to say that you won't have another secondary smaller place in the building, but again, those details can come up, but that's definitely a part of that.
Comment, question?
Yeah, I didn't know about this, but I'm just amazed by what's gonna happen here. That's amazing. I know something like that would be there, but I'm really surprised that what's gonna be there. And it looks fantastic.
Great, thank you.
It's something, for the whole community.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for that, yeah. Bernie, I'll come back to you, yeah.
Just wanted to thank you for your, actually, what you have come up with, I feel like you're very creative. Considering Lytton's needs and the weather and what's so on, it's really great to see that. Can you just give me a ballpark figure of the square footage, say in the upper level and the lower level, that an additional.
Is it on the place?
Was it there? Okay, I just.
The total building.
It's roughly this.
I'm sorry, I'm excited.
I suppose
It used to be, so is this the footprint or is this the total area?
That's the footprint.
The footprint, so approximately 1,200, approximately 1,180 meters for both floors, so that's 2,350 meters.
Square.
Square meters, square.
Yeah, the square feet are on there too.
It's.
Like,
25,000 square feet total, that's a footprint now,
Per floor?
both floors.
yes.
So 12,500 a product. And keep in mind that includes balconies, external balconies, that includes overhangs, that includes some of the setbacks. So it's not all built space, but that's an approximate sort of footprint of the building right now. $1 million a year.
Well, let's hope not.
The rule of thumb is interesting. Again, I think that it's interesting that we can start to look at some of those typical costs that other buildings maybe in the district have. And start to chip away at some of those things and keep things very simple, right?
Even half of that, my God.
You had a question, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just interested in people flow and a good little scenario. So if a caterer shows up with a van and they're going to deliver hot and cold food for that banquet room, could you just put your finger on the design and just show me where the van would come in and how they proceed to unload their materials and then access the banquet room?
Again, we're not showing the street and the sidewalk, we kept kind of trimmed that off. The sidewalk and the street are running along the off part of the page here. We imagine that there'd be a parking spot or a loading spot up front on the street. We're not providing specific loading for the building or any place for a truck to pull up. I think that's a little bit, creates a lot more use of space than we'd like to keep this elevation constant. But the idea is that roll in carts directly in the front door, hang left, and then deliver directly to the kitchen.
So that the
drivable road over here?
We're keeping that open there, primarily for residents, maybe to drop stuff off, move in, to move out.
So it's not that wide.
It's not that wide. It could be used as a potential space, a loading space for a van to park if they were there for a particular period of time. That is why it's there, but if it's just a simple drop off, and again, deliveries for sundries, maintenance supplies, toilet paper towels, things like that. There'll be short-term drop offs, and the idea being kind of wheel in, get the.
Like what they're doing recently. Okay.
Those units, the canopy is like over 4 meters high, so there's, as long as we provide a curb cut for someone to actually drive off the stop.
The curb cut, right?
Then they could drive under the canopy directly up to it.
Okay.
And that would be possible, so. we drive-
Oh, we see underneath the building.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah,
They have to discourage that, yeah. That's a good question, very interesting.
Are there any other questions, or do we want to just kind of, okay, I do have two more. Okay, Lorna. Any, meeny, miny, moe.
Small thought, so I'm just saying if the museum was open and people have to go in those main doors to get in there, how do we control them not hanging out washrooms, going down that wall? How will that be maintained?
a lot of, and this, it's not a unique issue. I mean, a lot of places have facilities that are not open at the same time as others. And we can do that simply with time blocks on certain parts of the building. For instance, the library could operate separately, can simply be on a time block, or somebody else can provide access to it when it is open. But I think the idea is that if the museum is open exclusively in the building and nothing else is happening in the building, we still like people to come into that front door and experience that building and experience the entry into the museum from the building as a means of addressing sort of the community space. And it's a sort of a transition space from outside to inside versus just simply walking through a door. So I think there's certain ways we can handle that, and there's ways to sort of work around some of those issues that you may have in security and access and other things. And a lot of these things are pretty prevalent and easily done with simple hardware and door hardware and other things like that.
And Judith, be the last one.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. Is, I know in the corner they have a below grade for some mechanical, but is this slab on grade and just that section is gonna be below grade?
Yeah, I think we're trying to limit the amount of low grade work that we do.
Right.
However, we don't want to.
The whole thing is not gonna be below.
No, we don't miss needed at all.
It's maybe an eighth of the building.
Yeah, sorry, I can point out to that.
Oh, that.
I'm talking about like you'll have an elevator pit, you'll have a set stair that goes down, so this portion of the building may be appropriate and enough to provide some storage space, mechanical, electrical, entry rooms and equipment down there. And as you can see, the site does kind of fall off, so you know, limiting because it is pushed further to the west, we limit the amount of excavation you have to do for the west of the road. So keeping it around that corner is our goal.
Thank you. So we'll have the boards out here, and people want to take a closer look if you sat back there.
We'll live here too. We'll keep them here.
Yeah, and they're going to stay here in the hall. So if you're back another time to take a closer look and visit with them. But again, thank you very much for making the trek up here and presenting.
Yeah, it was good.
And thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
We can share around and answer.
Yeah, right here. And if you guys have other questions you want to ask?
Yeah.
Well, we're looking at apartments. It's operating primarily in the academy.
In the front there.
Yeah.
Shall I?
I'll just, are we still recording?
But the idea as well is